All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the work of cognitive neuroscientist Dr. Caroline Leaf. We're going to explore one of her most influential ideas and really take a look at what the evidence says.
So, let's start with the idea that has really captured the imagination of millions. It's this concept that our mind isn't just a product of our brain, but it's actually a separate, powerful force that can physically reshape it. It's a pretty incredible thought, so let's break it down.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around the big claim we're looking at today, we've got to start with the theory it's all built on. So, what's the big idea here? Well, according to the sources, Dr. Leaf's theory makes this really key distinction. The mind isn't just what the brain does. Instead, it's this non-physical energy field where all our thinking and choosing happens. And that mind then acts on the physical brain, building our experiences right into its structure.
And wow, has this perspective taken off? It's had a massive impact. I mean, we're talking about Dr. Leaf's work reaching a huge global audience through podcasts, best-selling books, and apps, making her a really major voice in the wellness space.
And that brings us to the main event, the central and frankly very high-stakes claim we're investigating. It's a number that, if it's true, could pretty much change how we look at all of modern medicine.
Yeah, the sources we're digging into today all circle back to this one very specific and honestly pretty mind-blowing statistic.
And there it is. The assertion is that the vast majority, we're talking almost all, of human illness, both mental health stuff and physical diseases, doesn't start with germs or your genes, but from your own thoughts.
Okay, a number that huge definitely makes you ask, where does it come from? What's the scientific backing? So, let's follow that evidence trail laid out in the source materials and see where it takes us.
All right, first stop on the evidence trail. The first piece of evidence cited in the source documents connects the American Medical Association to the impact of stress on our health.
But when you dig into this citation, a couple of things pop up. First, the study was published in an AMA journal, but the AMA didn't actually conduct it. And maybe more importantly, the analysis says that 75% number, well, it isn't even in the paper. The paper talks about a link, a correlation between stress and some illnesses, not that it causes all of them. So this first stop doesn't quite seem to lock down that 75% figure.
All right, next up on the trail, the evidence points to cancer statistics from a couple of heavy hitters, the World Health Organization and the International Agency for Research on Cancer.
Okay, so an analysis of this one traces the stat all the way back to a Science News article from 1979. And the counterargument you see in the sources is pretty straightforward. Science, especially our understanding of genetics and cancer, has taken a giant leap forward in the 40-plus years since then, so it really raises the question of whether a source that old can be the bedrock for such a major claim today.
Okay, our final stop on this particular evidence trail is a quote from a Harvard professor, W.C. Willett, and it's all about the role of genetics in disease.
Now this is where the details really matter. The analysis points out a super important difference in the wording here. The original paper, it seems, was talking about highly penetrant mutations, which are a very specific, pretty rare type of genetic factor. That's not the same thing as all hereditary factors combined. And this is a big deal because it challenges that high-end 98% number, especially since the total impact of our genes is now thought to be a whole lot higher.
All right, so we followed the trail for that 75 to 98% claim. Now the analysis in our sources kind of pivots. It zooms way out and asks a different question. If our thoughts aren't the primary cause, then what are the big drivers of illness around the world?
And wow, this paints a really different picture. When you look at it globally, one of our sources highlights that a massive chunk of disease has less to do with individual thoughts and more to do with large-scale environmental stuff. As you can see here, things like dirty water, poor sanitation, diseases we have vaccines for. These things cause a huge amount of suffering.
And okay, what about in developed nations where those poverty-related issues aren't as big of a problem? Well, even there, the analysis shows that modern research points to a really significant genetic piece of the puzzle for a lot of common diseases. I mean, just look at this chart. For something like high cholesterol, our genes can account for 40 to 60% of the risk. And for type 2 diabetes, it's even more. It really suggests there's a complex mix of things going on.
So if the picture is way more complex than just our thought life, what else is in the mix for our well-being? To get a fuller picture, the sources point to several other well-researched ideas about what makes for good mental and physical health.
For example, there's something called the PERMA model. It's a pretty well-known scientific theory of well-being, and it argues that true happiness isn't about just one thing. Instead, it's a mix of 5 core ingredients:
positive emotion, being engaged in what you do, that flow state, strong relationships, having a sense of meaning and a feeling of accomplishment. It's a much more holistic approach, right? Health coming from all these different places.
And it's not just about the psychological stuff. There's just a mountain of research on the powerful, very physical things we can do for our health. We're talking about simple, concrete stuff. Getting quality sleep, eating a balanced diet, moving your body, and yeah, even just getting outside in the daylight. All of these have been shown to have a huge, huge impact on how we feel, both mentally and physically.
And finally, when it comes to dealing with specific mental health challenges, our sources bring up the proven success of therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This is an approach that has been clinically shown over and over to provide real long-term improvement for people dealing with things like depression and anxiety.
So where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway? It's pretty clear that these powerful ideas about our mind's ability to heal us really strike a chord. I mean, who doesn't want more control over their own health? But by actually tracing these claims back to their original sources and stacking them up against the broader scientific picture, we can all become sharper, more informed consumers of information. And that really leaves us with a final, crucial question to think about. How do we find that balance between an empowering message and the hard evidence that supports it?